On this episode of Business Relations, Rob and I discuss the impact and possible consequences of the recent Zillow lawsuit. Let's go. This is Industry Relations, a podcast that's at the intersection of real estate and technology from an insider's perspective, with Rob Hahn and Greg Robertson.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Industry Relations from this fabulous, brand new year of our Lord, 2024. This is your co-host, the notorious Rob Hahn, and as always, with me, my co-host, the fabulous Greg Robertson. Woo!
Hello, Rob.
Hola. Happy New Year. How are you,
man? Good. You know, I've survived. A lot of chocolate, a lot of treats, so I have to get on a treadmill or something, but doing okay.
Yeah, I'm really, I went kind of crazy, actually. I had this thing. I need to lose some weight. You know, I know that's like the New Year's,
of course,
thing.
Always, everybody's.
But it's something I've been planning for a while, so I just kind of went crazy. Just want to say, for the record, Sunny made this chocolate cake that was fucking to die for, and it just hurt me because I had like 2 slices before, and the New Year hits. Had to throw out the rest. It actually hurt me.
Oh, ouch.
It hurt me.
Ouch. God, you got more willpower than we do. I got 3 kids, so it's like, oh my God, it's just full.
It would have been great to have, kids here that could be like, here, guys, eat all the sugar and ruin your health in the future. God knows I did. But, so new year, new topics. No, of course not. It's not new topics. It's the same old topics. We're in the real estate industry.
It's never boring, for sure,
It's never boring. It's like variation of the same topic, but I figure we got to talk about like the big news that dropped right before the end of the new year. But I know there are some kind of caveats and disclaimers got to make right off the bat, because we are going to have to talk about the Zillow lawsuit against MLS Aligned. So I'm gonna turn it over to you real quick.
No, it's a very interesting thing. I mean, as most of you may know, there was a press release about that I was hired as an executive advisor for MLS Aligned back in November. Mm-hmm. So it's the holidays, so not a lot have transpired, but I have been getting my kind of feet wet a little bit about this. But anything, I don't have anything from I'm sure MLS Aligned will issue a legal statement in the next couple of weeks or something. And I don't have anything legally. I'm not like you say, I'm not your attorney. I'm not an antitrust expert or anything else. But from my opinions and having, gone through a little bit like this, I think very similar to things out there. I think I have a unique perspective to bring to these types of issues. And, I think, that's what I want to kind of keep it on is that. And I will say this from the start. There's no edict or anything else from MLS Aligned that they only want you to use one showing solution. I don't care. I don't think MLS Aligned cares if you have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 solutions in your MLS system. That's your decision to make, right? In fact, some of the MLS Aligned customer partners, some have just, aligned showings, and some have, aligned showings and something else like ShowingTime. So there's nothing from an MLS Aligned perspective that says, and I can't imagine any vendor telling an MLS, you have to do it this way or we're not going to do business with you. That would just be suicide, I think. But so just that's the only one thing there. Yeah.
No, that you got into some substance stuff we got to discuss. But to be clear, you are not the spokesperson for MLS Aligned. We have noted your quote conflict, if you will, if that's what it is. Because fact of the matter is, we're not just blogging. Like this isn't our primary thing, the podcasting and whatever. We have other things going on, and I think we are trying to be honest and open and transparent with our audience. When there's something going on that could influence sort of how they view their opinion. But to be clear, you are not spokesperson for MLS Aligned. You've not been. Do you know what I mean? Like, these are just your opinions. I just want to make that clear. This is not reflective of MLS Aligned, of ARMLS, of Metro, of any of those people. So we're clear. Yeah. But having said that, you are like one of the experts in prop tech and how prop tech relates to MLS. And that's really the essential thing here, right?
I think so, yeah.
So, I mean, I guess for the sake of completeness, we'll just start with the real basic facts, which is that Zillow has sued two MLSs who are part of MLS Aligned. They've sued ARMLS out of Phoenix, and they've sued Metro out of Milwaukee, I believe they are. Wisconsin, I know that. I've already kind of written about it. I think this is something that those two MLSs should settle immediately. I think they need to, because
I hope
there are other lawsuits that are coming, and I'm like, y'all don't have infinite legal budgets. So I don't think this is, in the scale of things, like, this isn't going to end up being Sitzer. There's not going to be a $2 billion judgment. You know what I mean? Like, it's not that. What's interesting about it, there are two things that are interesting. One is that Zillow brought a lawsuit, right, which they've never done. And I think that's significant. And the second one is exactly kind of the substance of it, which is essentially what the lawsuit claims, that the MLS controls the distribution of technology, right? And I think basically one of the things that was alleged in the lawsuit, and I'll be perfectly clear about it, even though I wrote about it, I think I mentioned 2 times in the article, we haven't seen the answer, right, from ARMLS, from the defendants. So this is only half the story, right? But just going by the half the story, which is the only story we have right now, what Zillow alleged is that ARMLS and Metro removed the integration with I think they called it the agent portal, the subscriber portal. And they also removed the data that ShowingTime needs in order to function. Again, like, who knows some of the details around that, but that's kind of where you're really, really familiar with how sort of that works.
So let me.
That's the factual background. Let's start with your take on it. What's your take as just, again, not a spokesperson, just as a prop tech expert?
Yeah. So let's just dispel that myth, one that you've kind of written about, and that's just right from the top. People in those members in those MLSs can use ShowingTime anytime they want. Full stop. There's nothing precluding those people from using ShowingTime at all, right? Now, how, it was easier to use it before. There's more steps involved now, but there's no reason that they can't use ShowingTime right now, right? So there's no ban on it, right? It's the way they want to integrate the system. Now, there's two things I want to talk about.
I was going to say, all right.
There's 2 things. There's implementation, meaning I'm going to implement the software. I'm going to allow these, users in my MLS market. And then there's integration. How tightly integrated I'm going to use that third-party system within my MLS system, right? Let me give you my experience. This is what I really want to talk about.
Yeah, okay.
Cloud CMA, right? So Cloud CMA, with some MLSs, had a button that said Cloud CMA integrated into. Now, this is integrated in the MLS system, right? And it was pretty slick, because you would go on the MLS, you'd choose the comps you want, you click the send to Cloud CMA button, it would then open Cloud CMA Cloud CMA product, and those MLS numbers would be into the product, and then you can go and make your report. Pretty cool. But you know what? Some MLSs didn't want to implement, integrate, I should say, Cloud CMA into their MLS system, right? So we had a number of ways that agents could use Cloud CMA. They could copy and paste MLS numbers into Cloud CMA. We had a way where we would choose the comps for them, and then they could cull down to the ones they actually want. We even went as far as created a bookmarklet in your browser that would facilitate that, because we knew not every, it's not the vendors. I don't have a vendor to say, you need to do it this way, right? We're not going to force a vendor how they're going to integrate our software in their system. That's just not our role, right?
Okay.
So let's talk about also integration, right? I like to say it takes 5 to tango, especially with showing software, right? You need the third-party vendor, in this case, Cloud CMA or ShowingTime. You need the MLS vendor, right? They have a role.
You mean this. Like the Core Logic, the FBS, the Black Knight? Okay,
right. So, and then you need the other vendors in the space if you're going to offer more than one solution. They all have to kind of work together. Anybody that works with MLS vendors and other things, this is not an easy task to do, right? So it's not the easiest thing in the world, right? So it's not just like, let's turn it on and turn off a button. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. right? I mean, it takes months, maybe a year planning to kind of do these types of things, right? So there's that. But so number one, anybody can use ShowingTime, right? Number two, it's the way how deeply you want to integrate it. That's has to do with what agreement you have with the MLS, that with the third party system, and every vendor should be flexible enough to have different ways of working with members in a system and not just rely on one way. Just because you had a monopoly before and didn't have any competitors, right? And we're kind of maybe not ready for this type of thing doesn't, that's not the MLS organization's fault.
Well, so I'm going to read a paragraph again, keeping in mind this is half the story, right? This is the complaint, and just kind of get your take on it. So this is from the complaint, paragraph 55. The practical effect of a showing management platform not being integrated into the MLS member portal is that the platform is functionally unworkable for most agents. The manual processes involved in setting up a listing in ShowingTime and scheduling appointments when the, quote, schedule a showing smart link cannot be selected render the transaction cost of viewing ShowingTime, a service intended to simplify an agent's workflow, too high, particularly when a different showing management platform is integrated with the MLS member portal. Now, so this is something that you have direct experience with Cloud CMA, right?
Of course it was.
What's wrong with what Zillow is claiming here?
I just don't know if they've ever tried any other way, right? So, or if they've experimented on other ways. Again, we had four different ways of working Cloud CMA within MLS, right? Was it better when it was integrated? Of course it was. Yeah, I would prefer every MLS in the country. I'm not going to sue them to do that, though. I mean, they have their own reasons of why they want to integrate or why they can integrate. Maybe it's cost. I don't know what they are. It's just like I, as a vendor, had to be ready to work in any way possible I could with this MLS that I was trying to do business with.
So was there, like, when you were doing Cloud CMA and you weren't integrated, was there another CMA that was?
Yeah.
And did you see any impact on your usage rates?
Well, our main competitor, our main competitor was always the CMA within the MLS system, which was, of course it's fully integrated, right?
Yeah, come on.
Well, no, but Rob, in a case right now where we're talking about platform of choice, system of choice, those things are becoming, and this thing is, they're saying it's all about choice. Well, yeah, how it's done is, it is factored in that way for sure.
Okay. So basically your position then is, so what's the implication of that, right? Your position appears to be that the MLS can do whatever it wants, integrate whoever, not integrate whoever, and whatever the consequence of competition or competitive balance, who gives a shit?
Okay, that's a great question. So let's look at that. Let's look at it that way. So there's two things. Like I said, MLS Aligned is a vendor. They don't give a shit. 5, 6, 7, go. But every MLS has different policies and things. One thing I highlight is that, a lot of MLSs have a policy where a participant cannot provide solutions to the MLS organization on a MLS wide basis, right? And that makes perfect sense to me. Let's say John L. Scott came up with some new reverse processing solution. And the MLS says, that's great. Let's provide that on our MLS to everybody. Well, Windermere would be pretty pissed off about that, right? Having another broker in the MLS, providing the technology for the MLS, and then them kind of getting credit. And then for those that say, well, they're not charging for it. Hey, when you're not charging for something, you're the product, right? They could get the cachet of that or whatever else you want to talk about, right? So I think, some MLS executives and some MLS board of directors had said, well, we have this policy, or they might think that maybe this isn't, maybe right now this is an easy way, but 10 years from now, we know the consequences of what's going to happen. So we're going to enforce that this policy, or we're going to enforce this thing. Now that's their job. The MLS executives and MLS boards are put there to make those tough decisions. Some MLS executives and some MLS boards don't want to make that tough decision. Just let ShowingTime do its things like it's always done. But some have not. It's not the vendor's choice. The vendor can't force them I don't think. I mean, it just seems ludicrous to say, no, you have to do it our way, right? Any business or any MLS organization, whether can make those decisions based on trust, based on product quality, based on relationships, based on whether you have a shirt on or shoes on, right?
Yeah, the problem is that you can't, actually, right? The issue is that you actually can't. And it's not the vendor forcing you one way or the other. The issue is that the law forces you to do one way or the other.
Well,
right?
I mean, again, you're not a legal scholar. I'm not a legal scholar. We'll find that out. But from a basic
I play one
level,
on TV, Greg. You know,
yeah. But I mean, I walk into any diner or any restaurant and it says no shoes, no shirt, no shirt, no service, right? So I think it's a very American thing to say, I'm going to choose who I can do business with.
Yeah, but right? that's different, right? Again, the whole point is that this inhibits competition, right? And that's the whole point. We're not talking about serving consumers here. You know, no shirt,
again,
no service.
Anybody in that MLS can still use ShowingTime. Full stop.
Yeah, if you jump through 17 hoops.
Well, I mean, again, that's what every vendor has to deal with. There's either an integration or not. Because you still have to figure out.
And my point is, Greg, isn't that essentially the core issue? In other words, I'm not disagreeing. Like, this is the way things work today, right? And you're right. Like, to whatever extent MLS boards can make whatever policy, you know, some MLS are going to have some rule. Again, like, leave NAR out of it for the time being, because we know that NAR sets a lot of those mandatory policies, right? One group of MLS is like, hey, we're not going to allow participants to provide services, you know, through the MLS, right? Others are going to be like, we don't care. The issue is the MLS is a monopoly. Like, here are the things that I feel like you can't deny. The MLS is a monopoly. It controls the flow of data, and it controls the distribution of technology. Because being integrated into the MLS makes a huge difference than being not integrated, right? Which you've seen yourself, right? Now, is that an insurmountable odd? No, I don't think that's like the fact that Cloud CMA was usable when there's no integration, right? Like, there is some level to that. Well, that's number one. But number two, well, let's do it one thing at a time. But fact is, not being integrated does make it harder for Cloud CMA to compete against some CMA platform that is integrated, right? And, you know, though effectively you got successful because Cloud CMA was so much better, like so much superior than the built-in, that, you know, people are willing to jump through hoops in order to use your system. I mean, is that a fair characterization?
Well, I mean, it was a good product, right? I mean,
absolutely. I know. So if there was a product that's roughly equivalent, but that was integrated, like, doesn't that make it harder to compete?
Again, there's no one telling MLS Align doesn't care whether. I mean, it's from an MLS to MLS issue, right? I mean, if an MLS has a policy that says that participants can't provide technology or something, that's perfectly, I think, okay for an MLS to make that decision. I mean, it sets a bad precedent to me, because what's stopping Zillow from going, you know what? They're going to bully MLSs into integrating dot loop. They're going to bully MLSs into integrating follow-up boss. Right. What's stopping CoStar to do the same thing and say, no, you must implement every homes.com app we have? Well, I mean, it's just, I mean, where does it?
It's actually a much simpler rule, which is if you're going to integrate one, you have to integrate all.
Yeah, can you imagine an MLS system that is hardly right now usable to like?
Oh no, I don't. Like I said,
it'll look like Microsoft Word with every option on the. You know, that meme that has like that the bar is this much, and actually the word where you type is only that much. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Like I said, I mean, I'm not. You know, the fact that the systems as they exist today can't accommodate anything like this, like. Yeah, I mean,
Nobody could accommodate anything like that.
No, not today.
As far as like any third-party solution, how many?
Not the architecture today. Yeah. But I mean, what I'm getting at is, I mean, this is actually a little bit similar to Microsoft, right? When they got sued by the Department of Justice because they made Internet Explorer the default browser, right? And it basically bankrupted Netscape. That was the big DOJ lawsuit, right? And it's a little bit like that. It's like, hey, and in that case, people could use Netscape, and even then, Microsoft got sued.
Yeah, right? I mean, again, there's two parties here. There's the vendor, and then each MLS has the ability to make a decision, not one vendor like Microsoft. I mean, it doesn't make any sense. The analogy doesn't
I
make
know.
any sense.
What I'm saying is what this lawsuit then will set the precedent is that each MLS does not have that ability. You cannot discriminate between vendors. You have to treat them all the same.
That's. I mean, I think
that's what's going to come out of this.
A practical standpoint, that's a little bit nuts. I mean, any vendor can force themselves onto a system is, yeah. Wow.
Why is it so hard to offer integration to all?
Let me ask a question. Who pays for all this?
The subscriber.
Right.
In other words, so 10 years ago.
Let's just go to CoreLogic or Black Knight. You have to integrate all these systems. Well, they're not going to do it for free.
Yeah.
Right. So I've got to like integrate a vendor that has two clients in my my neighborhood, which is, whatever. Yeah.
So look, I'm not saying technologically this is ready to happen right now, right? But I will tell you a story from my past, which is 10 years ago, when I was like acting as the interim CMO at Bright, back then called MRIS. One of the big projects we were pursuing was the App Store. Do you remember when this was like the big thing in the MLS space? And the idea was that the MLS itself would offer, quote, an app store, and then all these tech platforms, all these vendors would be there, and then the subscriber could go in and just click a button and then have that app now show up. It would like auto integrate, right? I don't remember what happened to it. It didn't really go anywhere. I'm not aware of any. I mean, I've seen some of those dashboards today where it's like there's like a dashboard and you can pick a whole bunch of different apps. But I just know the energy is not there anymore. Like no one's really talking about, what the MLS needs an app store. But I remember that, right?
Yeah. There was there was FBS had like the Spark store, I think. There was a lot of, I think, all that. I mean,
that would work.
That's a separate subject because I don't know if it's separate or whatever, but
it's related, right? Because that would work.
It's discovery. Discovery was more of the thing there of like, how do you like, I mean, I think MLSs have a problem right now with discovery. Like there's so many solutions out there. How do people know about it? And then they have restrictions on letting the vendors actually communicate directly with, with their members, right? Which adds another problem to it.
That's a whole different issue. Yeah. But I'm just saying, like, if there was an app store type approach, that would actually answer this issue, which is the MLS says, you know what? We're not integrating anybody and not integrating other people. We're just going to create this app store. Hey, subscriber, you want to use ShowingTime? Click the ShowingTime.
Yeah, I think maybe there is a magical API that could be created, right? Now, again, like I said, it takes 5 to tango, right? So getting that magical API created, and like think about this: if you're Zillow, would you want to participate in that magical API?
I don't know what you mean. What?
I mean, they have the market now. Why would they want to make it easier for other solutions to come in, right? Or any other vendor, right? I mean, but if if the industry goes towards a magical API, maybe all this stuff goes away, right? But I mean, to force, I think it's different from like letting a user select what they want versus you have to put my button in your system. I think those are two different things. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I completely agree with that. In other words, I think if the argument here is that, and this is reality, the reality picture, right, is for the longest time, man, ShowingTime was the only game in town, right? There was ShowingTime and their centralized showing services. For the longest time, it was those two.
Yeah, I mean, and let's give credit. I mean, Scott and Mike built an amazing company, and like Michael Lane is the most stand-up guy.
Yeah.
That you have out there. But again, this isn't ShowingTime. This is ShowingTime Plus, right? Okay, this is, I dealt with this with Cloud CMA selling to Lone Wolf, right? This is not the same thing. This is a part of a larger market strategy that many MLSs might not feel comfortable with.
Sure. I mean, then they're free to think whatever. I'm just pointing out that for the longest time, it was a 2-horse race. It was CSS and it was ShowingTime. ShowingTime won that race, more or less, right?
Well, they bought him.
And what?
They bought him.
But that's even before they were bought, is my point. Like Zillow bought them because ShowingTime more or less won that race. right?
Well, I think they bought them because they couldn't get into markets where CSS was.
Who couldn't?
ShowingTime, without any successful adoption.
I just remember ShowingTime crushing competition for a long time because Mike Lane, to your point, is a stand-up guy, right? And because they were independent, a lot of MLSs just integrated them, right? Because showing service is one of those things where network effect actually really helps. Right? It actually helps for everyone to be on the same platform, right? It's a little bit like, it's a little reminiscent of do you remember in the early days of mobile phones, there were two different technologies for cell phones? This might be going way back to like the early 90s. And TDMA. Remember that?
Yeah.
And because of that technology, like different networks, they didn't talk to each other. Like if you're on if you're on the Verizon network, you actually couldn't call somebody on the AT&T network in the early days because of the difference.
I don't think I had a cell phone back then enough.
I kind of remember that. So my point is, it makes sense. Like it's much more beneficial to everybody if you get on the same platform, so that it doesn't matter which carrier you're with. You could call your buddy on, whatever, right? T-Mobile, and they could call you, right? So like showings, MLSs, a lot of these things are kind of like that, where there's really no benefit to having multiples unless they're all in the same standard, same backend. That was not the case with ShowingTime and CSS. So my point being, for the longest time, it was just kind of hey, you know what? We're going to go with ShowingTime. We're going to go with CSS. And then we're going to integrate that to make it easier for everybody, right?
No, the integration, I think, didn't happen. I think they bought CSS, right? So it was basically the same company.
What do you mean? Oh, ShowingTime bought CSS. Yeah, eventually. Yeah. But I mean, it's like at the integration at the MLS level, right? To make it easier, where you could just say, like, click this button, schedule showing, right?
Well, CSS.
That's the claim here. That's a member portal, right?
Well, yeah, the MLS system, member portal.
The MLS system, integrated.
Yeah, CSS had a button probably, and ShowingTime had a button in their respective markets.
Right. Exactly.
So I'm not sure what you're saying. So you think that the ability for an MLS to make the decision because of all the positive reasons of network effects should be taken away?
No. What I'm saying is this just I'm just saying out the historical background for why we got to this point, right? Again, this wasn't some evil, like, ARMLS or some MLS it was just like natural growth of like these types of technologies, right? Because here's the thing, like the MLSs didn't really ever do that for things like IDX websites, right? IDX websites just like, go get an IDX vendor, request a feed, we'll send them a feed, have at it, right? Now, some MLSs did try to do like these preferred deals, was like, here's our preferred IDX vendor. And if they would get a rev share back. They did do a bunch of that stuff, but it was never the case where it's like, this IDX vendor is significantly easier to use or integrate or whatever than some other IDX vendor, right? With something like showings, there was this the network effect thing meant that the MLS just wanted to pick one. Right. It's, it's a lot like lockboxes today, actually.
Yeah. So, but again, I mean, I understand that. But
okay. So here we are. So the issue here is that for the longest time, ShowingTime was the monopoly.
Right.
Right. Naturally, it was a natural monopoly within each MLS system. So therefore, MLS integrated them. Okay. They get bought by Zillow. It makes industry freak out. All of a sudden, all these people come up with all these different things. Some of it because the MLS had some policy. We can't use technology via participants. Zillow's a participant. We need to go buy agent inbox and then, resurrect it and create our own. Okay. So far, so good, right? The issue then becomes ShowingTime loses its monopoly position, right? And now finds itself on the other end of that.
Yeah.
Right. And they're like, we're not having that. So to some extent, the claims of hypocrisy, I think, are well earned, right? Like, you used to be the monopoly, you're no longer the monopoly, and now you're bitching about it because somebody else has the monopoly. However, that's all true. Okay, let's just take that as a given. However, what it does then bring to the fore is, because this lawsuit, how it gets settled, whatever they agreed to, it ends up being, okay, that old system that entire old structure, old system has to get busted. All right. What Zillow is going to have to then bring forth is the idea of go back to an app store, go back to something else where the MLS is no longer going to pick winners and losers. The MLS has to treat everyone equally, which means no more exclusive deals, no more integrated apps. Like if you're going to integrate one app, you have to allow all apps to be integrated. And the technology for that does not exist today. I'm agreeing with you. Like maybe FBS is time for them to resurrect Spark, apps or whatever. Like maybe like that's what this brings forth. But that's what we're talking about, right?
Yeah, I mean, it goes down to more of a standards thing because I don't think there's a standard for swapping back showing information. So some of these magical APIs would have to be bespoke, right? And like no vendor, whether you're ShowingTime, FPS, Insta Showings, or whoever wants to would probably have to do a significant amount of work to make it, make it work with these with a magical API. If anybody, and I think some vendors would probably have more motivation to do it than others, right? So we don't even know. And I don't know if is that a year? Is that 2 years? Is it,
who knows?
Is it 6 months? I don't know.
Who knows? But what it does mean though, I think, is that it does mean that the MLS no longer can play that role.
Well, we'll see, right? I mean, I don't know if it's such a bad thing as you described in some cases where, you know what, network effects matter, and that's going to trump our decision here. And yeah, no, we don't want to choose a winner and loser, but unless we have a network effect in one product here, it's never, I mean, you could, without a magical API, you're never going to have you can't select multiple houses to go on a route if they're all on different platforms, right? So
right.
I don't know if it's ever going to get to a point where you want to take away the ability for an MLS to make a decision based upon, something like network effects where, I'm sorry, but in this case, we need to choose one and we've done a lot of research and this is the best one we want to choose. That goes away. I don't know. I mean,
I don't know if that goes away, Greg, because here's the thing. What the antitrust laws prohibit is a conspiracy to blah, 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 right? And so one of the things I wrote was, I'm shocked that ARMLS and Metro made this decision and that their lawyers did not go to them and say, hey guys, we can't do this because we're part of MLS aligned, right? Or if we are going to do this, we have to be super duper careful because we are in a network, right? Because that's what MLS aligned is. It's a group of 6 MLSs.
It's a company, yeah. I mean, you don't have to prove anything. I mean, they're a company, they're owners of a company together.
Correct. Yeah. And then to implement that app as the default in our system, we're going to have to jump through all sorts of hoops and justify it so that we don't get sued. I'm just surprised by it.
There's other MLS aligned partners that have both solutions. So, I mean, it's not, it's not like every MLS aligned customers. It's just, again, it's an MLS to MLS decision, right?
Sure. What I'm getting at though, Greg, is if the industry has learned nothing else, is that when you do group action, you need to be super careful.
Yeah. Well,
like I said, if it was just a single MLS in Kentucky somewhere who said, hey, you know what, we need to pick between ShowingTime and this, Insta Showing, right? And because of network effect, we got to pick one, right? And they go through this whole thing and they sort of publicize that decision and say, we are going to pick Insta Showing because of XYZ reason. I don't think that that's a antitrust violation, right? It's hard to prove conspiracy, right? It's hard to, there's a bunch of things that are missing. I'm just getting at, if you are part of a group like MLS Aligned or MLS Grid or, I don't know, a bunch of these things that have popped up in recent years, right? These groups of MLSs coming together. And I'm not saying for some evil, nefarious reason. A lot of it is, let's share costs for technology development, right? We don't all have Zillow budgets. So, let's try and create something that could be of value. I get it. I'm just getting at, when you are part of those types of groups and those types of networks, you gotta really be careful about what you then do.
And again, they might have been ultra super careful. We don't know the response yet.
We don't know.
Yeah.
But to get sued by Zillow, and again, we do know a little bit because Errol did, sort of that open letter, and in the complaint, it talks about we went to these guys and said, well, what if we did this? What if we did that? So there were conversations happening, right? And to me, the fact that at no point that there wasn't, I don't know, maybe the answer will make this clear. It's like, no, we did go through all that, right? And our counsel told us these things and we can do this. Okay, then that will be that, right?
it also could be true. You could phrase that another way. Well, we went to them and they wouldn't do what we wanted to do. And so anybody that's done any, just because they didn't want to do it the way you wanted it done, doesn't mean that either side is right or wrong, right? It's just you have a disagreement.
Yeah. This is just a business civil disagreement. My point is the fact that, like, Zillow didn't sue for breach of contract, right? They sued for antitrust. And the key thing there is that you are part of a group, right? And you are implementing things and disadvantaging a competitor. That's the wrinkle, right? So like I said, I don't think this goes to trial, right? I think they just settle, right? So the question then is, okay, what does that settlement look like? I doubt it looks like, hey, we're going to make ShowingTime the monopoly, right? Like, ARMLS has implemented MLS Align. That's their default exclusive showing platform in ARMLS today. Okay, the settlement would probably say something like, you're going to give some sort of option to each agent to select which showing platform. Do you know what I mean? And then there's probably going to be some conversation. Okay, cool, we can do that, guys, but then you're going to need to share back your data so that someone using Align showings can book a showing on one of the homes that you are managing. Does that make sense? Like, we do have to go to more of that. That's cool. Then the MLS has to enforce this common standard or data sharing arrangement or something, right? Like,
yeah, I think you're overlooking. There's two things. There's the tech wise, right? But would Windermere be okay with John L. Scott having all this data? Right? There's data implications. There's other things about this kind of participant vendor thing, and it seems like Zillow and others want to like use the participant to get when it's in their benefit, but when it's not in their benefit, it's like, well, no, we're not really a participant, right? But give us the data because we're a participant, right? So and that's, I think, the industry's fault, because we don't have any other way of these type of entities doing it. So but there's not just a technical thing to this. There are I think some real discussion about this participant versus vendors thing that you might be overlooking a little bit in your analysis.
I don't disagree with that. I mean, do I think that some parts of the industry are particularly retarded when it comes to that sort of thing? I do. Like, okay, if I'm John L. Scott and Windermere develop some amazing tool, right, that's going to make my agents more productive and make me more money, I'm not going to use it because it's going to give Windermere data. Like, come on, like, come on, dude. Like, you're not a data company, you're not this. Even Google and Apple collaborate, is my point, right? It's so there's a little bit of short-sighted, like, tribal shit, and I understand, because our industry is filled with big personalities, and sometimes people just kind of don't like each other, and they go, I'll be damned if I'm going to give that guy. And you're like, okay, fine, like, do whatever you want, right? It's your company.
Yeah, I think that's a little naive. I mean, especially with the upcoming, like, it's going to be easier and easier for non-data companies, non-technical companies, to take a corpus of data and really, really do something with it, right? So,
we're talking as if Google doesn't already have all that data anyway, or like. So it's like, yes, I understand. Look, I understand the importance of all that, but what this gets to, I think, so there, like I said, there are two things. One was the idea that the MLS is like the gatekeeper of the technology efficiency or relationship. I think that is now history after this. And that is, in effect, the way that the industry has worked for at least as long as I've been in it, right? Because think about, like, as a vendor, the provisioning conversation, which you and I have had, right? Like, Reso does a great job with sort of the data standards. But the one thing that Reso doesn't do is provisioning, right? So the fact that in some cases, Cloud CMA, you could be going 90 days just to get the the blessing of the MLS.
Yeah, the permissioning.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, all of that is going to have to get worked out, I think, as a result of this lawsuit and the settlement. Right? Again, the technologies to support something like that does not exist today. Let's just be plain about that. Right? Like, we don't have an app store. We don't have the standard. We don't have auto provisioning, auto permission. We don't have any of those things. So it's something we're going to have to work through. Thankfully, if the two guys settle, if Zillow and the MLSs settle, then they could work it out. Right? They could work it out. So we'll see. The second big thing that I do think is worth us talking about, because we have, good, let's say 15 minutes left, is I thought it was significant that Zillow brought a lawsuit. Did you see anything in that? Because Zillow has never done this.
Yeah, I mean, I was always wondering what the hell they were having Errol doing. I guess he's just turned out to be the corporate blogger when there's bad news, right? It's like, hey, we told you we weren't going to be a broker. Now we are. Here's Errol. Hey, we're suing you. Here's Errol. Take it away, Errol. Right? Yeah. I mean, it is kind of odd. Just who knew? I mean, they such downplayed the ShowingTime acquisition when it first was announced. Like, oh, don't worry, we're not going to use any data. The data is going to be in a silo, and all this kind of stuff. Like, it wasn't that big of a deal. And everybody's wondering what the hell are they going to do with this. To now it becomes a central, enough where they're going to sue their own customers. The
MLS is not their customer, right?
Oh, they aren't. Okay. So what are they?
They're the conduit, right? But my point is this.
But their MLSs were cutting checks to ShowingTime. What do you mean they're not their customer?
Were they? Okay,
yes,
yeah.
Of course.
Well, if they're not cutting checks anymore, they're not customers.
Again, you
former
still have
customers.
They are a customer.
Former customers.
No, you could have a customer that may not be, that you don't currently have a financial thing with. Customers, clients, or whatever. I'm sure you have clients that are not paying you right now.
No, if they're not paying me, they're not a client.
Okay.
I take sort of the lawyer's approach to it.
Yeah.
No, but like I said, again, man, you and I have been around this space for
again, it just shows to me like how, I guess this is super duper important, right? And were they not thinking that at one point they're going to have, because if it goes the way that you're saying, that at some point in time anybody can choose what showing service they have, well, that doesn't sound good for Zillow either, right? It doesn't sound like the Zillow ever had a thought in their mind that there'd be anything else but ShowingTime, right?
No, I don't think Zillow would be concerned about that, because I think those guys.
Why are they suing anybody then?
Because they want access and they want integration.
No, again, you can use ShowingTime in those places now, today.
Again, if you put enough barriers in the way, then that's not. That's not fair competition.
That's right? Show business. I had to deal with it.
I understand.
For 10 years. I understand.
That's my point. I know you made it through the competitive barriers, right? But it is against the law to put competitive barriers in the way.
Yeah,
The fact that you never sued them because that wasn't your style doesn't mean that you couldn't have. Right? So what I'm getting at, the second part to me that's interesting is you and I both know that Zillow has lived through some serious abuse over the years. Like, they've been the industry's punching back for years and years and years. And they have never fought back. They have never done anything like this.
Yeah, I hope that this doesn't put me in some sort of like, the Zillow Zatorade, right? A bit. I think it's been the goddamn agents and the industry should have, I think we've talked about should get over this a long time ago. They're just here. Now suing their customers, that's a big thing to kind of cross over. And it shows how important this is to them, right? Which is, again, kind of baffling to me, but yeah.
It's ShowingTime, and ShowingTime Plus is like central pillar of the Rich Barton strategy for how Zillow is going to grow. So I understand why it's so important to them. I'm just saying there were in previous years, in previous conflicts, there were similar things that were just as important to Zillow, and they never went this far. They've always been
But like what?
They've always been
like what?
Like what?
Like what?
Oh God, trying to think back in the day.
I mean,
Like
they've pretty much gotten
all the times that MLSs have threatened to cut off feeds, right? All the times that, you know, that brokers are like, there's one, what was it, Claw? Any odds for a while was sending them a feed with like a delay, right? There have been a lot of those types of attempts over the years, right? Right after Realtor.com bought ListHub, right, is when Zillow went and started their own industry relations team, because they're like, we need direct feeds from MLSs, you know, like.
Well, I think ListHub had announced they were going to, the price was going away, the agreement was going to be restructured. But
bigger than that, back then, Realtor.com was like the biggest rival that Zillow had, and they're like, our biggest rival owns our pathway to listing data. Like, they're like, we can't have this. So there were a lot of those important things, and they
but I don't know where would the lawsuits? Who would you sue in those circumstances?
I don't know. I mean, but they never went down that road. Is my point, right? They've always been sweethearts, right? And I think the way I look at it is they've always kissed the ass. They've always been like, even though the MLS would constantly like beat on Zillow, Zillow would be like, we love the MLS, we want to partner with you. You know, come to our MLS summit. Let us wine and dine.
The MLS,
it was always that.
Zillow needs, Zillow needs the MLSs to work the way they do.
Of course.
To make everything work. I mean, they've always been, I think, aligned, especially with all this other stuff, the commission lawsuits and everything
agreed.
Yeah,
that's my point. Right. So to me, I thought it was significant that Zillow went aggressive.
Yeah. I think a lot of people think it's kind of aggressive now, for sure.
The question is, okay, does this spread? Do other large companies with big budgets, because let's face it, right? Like, ARMLS are top 10 MLS, right? I think they're a top 10 MLS. They're big. You know, they're a big major MLS in the MLS space. But man, y'all ain't got the legal budget that Zillow's got. You just don't. You don't have the legal budget that some of the bigger companies in our space have, whether that's CoStar or Redfin or, you know, even probably Lone Wolf, you know. Do you know what I'm saying? Like, there's some big companies in our space that if they decided to get aggressive, and MLS can't compete with that.
Yeah, I mean, it would be unfortunate that, you know, there'd be, I mean, to me, this is a bit, I mean, this would be the birth of a lot of just bullies, right? Because of what they have. I mean, they're just going to bully the way they want to do that. And then what you're saying is that, you know, just because they have the money, they can do whatever they want. I mean, that's a tough pill to swallow.
And you know what? That's the way that business has worked in corporate America for, like, I don't know, 50 years. And it just hasn't in our space during that entire time. Right. And a big part of it is because of kind of the MLSs of NAR, of companies like Zillow deciding we're going to play nice with these guys instead of, you know, bullying them. And I'm saying here we are in 2024. For me, something's changed. Right. In other words, here's what I'm wondering. Say back in 2019, and this happens. Does Zillow sue?
Well, again, their strategy, I don't think they bought ShowingTime at that point, or they just did, right? So there wasn't
let's say what I'm saying is
around
this all happened. Yeah, let's say that, like, it's the exact same thing. It's just we're shifting the time back to, say, 2018, 2019. I don't think they do. I think there's something going on, and
I think there's something going on is ShowingTime is so central to their strategy that they felt they had to, right? So I think that's what's going on. I don't think it's because 2018 was a different time, right? And on a calendar. I mean, it's just, apparently there's something so central to ShowingTime or ShowingTime Plus, that they felt in order to keep that strategy intact, they had to do this. I mean, because you're right, it's like a last resort thing, right? To me, I mean, you don't sue your customers, and as far as I know, I think Metro MLS is still paying them.
That's gonna stop.
Well, I don't know. I mean, if they were offering it for free to ARMLS, do other MLSs continue to pay?
Oh, I assume every MLS would be calling them up and like, hey, so we saw in the complaint that you offered the basic whatever thing for free. We're going to renegotiate. Like, I assume that conversation is happening, right? If not, like, you call your Zillow rep, I guess is what I would call it.
Yeah.
Say, I don't know. Look, it may be exactly to your point, like that even back in 2016, 17, 18, Zillow would have brought a lawsuit if what was being done was so central to them. I'm taking a slightly different approach. I think something has changed, and I think the thing that's changed is Sitzer. Right? I think
so
after Sitzer
they saw an opening to, hey, if I put the label antitrust on it, it's going to have a more likely thing to prevail.
Not only that, but I think the issue is NAR is dead man walking. Right? Because before, if you sued an ARMLS, if you had sued an MLS, you have to then maybe contend with NAR legal defense, right? And NAR kind of rallying all the other MLSs, right? And fucking you over. Conversely, it meant that because in previous
I don't know
fights,
if this to me is more of a contract agreement issue between a vendor and a MLS. I mean, I don't know if this is
it's really not
conspiracy to provide commissions or something. Or
no, it's really
NAR
not.
I don't think NAR has ever assisted an MLS in a contract agreement.
But it's not a contract agreement. It's an antitrust violation. It's an antitrust suit.
Well, that's what Zillow wants to paint it as. But I mean, some judge could look at this and throw it out saying this is an antitrust.
There's no chance that a judge throws this out.
I don't know. I mean, I saw on Twitter, somebody was arguing with you about that. But this is no. Somebody said that this is going to be. They see this kind of stuff all the time, and this is going to be the court's just going to throw this out.
Sorry, read the complaint. Read Sherman Antitrust Act law. I mean, it's pretty bad. So my point though is whatever happens. So for example, Kansas City, a few years ago, got sued for antitrust. For linking realtor membership to MLS membership, right? And NAR legal stepped in, right? And there's a flip side to this. What does this have to
do with NAR though? What does this thing?
So the flip side of it is, I think there was a time when NAR was much more powerful in influencing MLS decisions, right? So that Zillow could have gone to NAR because they did that a few times, right? And had policy passed at the NAR level and then had the local MLSs change a variety of things, right? Things like, delays on listing data being sent, things of that nature, right? So I think what I'm suggesting is this is happening partly because the importance of ShowingTime to Zillow's overall corporate strategy. The other part being we're in a bit of a Wild West situation, right? Because NAR is so weakened, right? Because of Sitzer lawsuit, because of all the things that are happening, right? Because of Bright MLS, which we talked about in the last episode, right? When they said, well, it was zero. And NAR goes, you know what? It was zero all along. No, it wasn't. You liar. Mm-hmm. Gaslighter. No, it wasn't. So there's a little of that. And I think that leads to a different environment is all I'm getting at, right? Where maybe it's not positive because to your point, now it is whoever has the bigger pockets, we can bully others who don't, right? Because we can afford lawyers and you can't. But it's 2024, baby. Like that's what I'm getting at. It's like these two things were the lawsuit itself. I don't think is that big a deal.
I see some of the things you're saying. I don't get this thread you're pulling with NAR, but I mean, okay. The only thread I would say is that as I said was maybe because there's this blood in the water with the phrase antitrust or Sherman Antitrust that they're in this lawsuit, they're kind of taking advantage of that. Just on a surface, you say, this is antitrust. And like everybody goes, oh, that's not a good thing. For me, reading headlines of newspapers, that's not a good thing. But who knows? I mean, I hope all this gets resolved. I hope cooler heads prevail. I hope that
this will settle.
That as a businesses can make their own decisions of who they want to work with. And if that takes a little bit extra due diligence, then so be it. But and again, it is really unfortunate because I see, all the people we know in the industry. It's not a good it's not a good thing here for somebody, number one, to bully, number two, to see these, some good people out there kind of be at odds with each other. And it's not a good situation at all.
Yeah. I mean,
in my opinion, all of this is in my opinion.
Are you going to Inman? Are you going to Inman, New York?
I'm not going to Inman. Not that I know of. I mean, there could be some last minute thing, but I've got to make a couple East Coast trips already this month. So a third one, I'm not sure I'm going to be ready for. So we'll see what happens.
Because I was genuinely curious. I mean, again, you and I both know every industry conference, Zillow has a party, they have an event, they have hospitality suites, et cetera, et cetera. And in previous years, right? Like, I know who I could expect to see there, right? And a lot of them were MLS executives and, MLS people, right? I'm genuinely curious what happens in Inman, New York. Whether
they show up. I mean, I don't know. People want a free drink or a free meal. I mean, I'm sure I'll listen to you make your side of the story while I'm eating a ribeye. Sure. What the hell?
Right. Plus, those relationships to go back a long ways. I mean, some of those individuals.
Yeah. I mean, again, like I said, what Scott and Mike built was amazing. I mean, ShowingTime is an amazing story, right? I mean, ShowingTime Plus, we'll have to see.
We'll have to see. Yeah. All right. Let's leave it there for now. Like I said, I'm saying this is a harbinger of 2024. You're saying it's not. I'm sure we'll have more things like this to talk about in future episodes. But great to be back on the air with you, sir. And thanks, everybody, for listening. And we will see you next time.
Listen, content is everything. Two Brothers Creative makes it look easy. Right now, business owners really only have two options. The first option is hire a big firm. Now, this big firm's going to come in, make you think that they invented all the algorithms, and start charging you thousands of dollars every month. You don't want to do that. Second option is to do it yourself. Well, that means you got to learn SEO, SEM, copywriting, marketing techniques on the web. You should be really focusing on your own product. But now there's a third option. It's called Content in a Box. Give Two Brothers Creative 30 minutes a week and they'll handle everything. Plus, they'll show you how to bring it in-house later on. They'll rebuild your marketing foundation and give you tools and techniques and a new marketing playbook that'll actually produce real results and help you grow your business. Two Brothers Creative will give you the confidence and know-how to tell the SEOs and SEMs and all those other acronyms to get fucked. You're in control now. Get started today at thecontentbox.com.